Hi everyone, my name is Jonathan Dionne. I'm with the Long Branch Neighborhood Association, and today we'll be going over planting and taking care of your new tree. So there's a couple things we're going to go over today. We'll first start off with looking at where to plant your tree, when to plant your tree. Then we'll get into the hows of what to do to prepare for your planting and how to actually plant your tree. Then we'll do a little bit on maintenance, such as watering, mulching, and some extra care that might be needed in certain situations. So the first thing, like I said, is location. So trees are all different. They all have different height, light tolerance, and they actually have all different canopy widths. So these are all things that you will have to consider before you plant your tree, making sure that there's nothing overhead or that the tree won't grow into anything surrounding that might cause damage or obstruction. So finding the proper placement of the tree is really important and the first step to encouraging that tree to grow well and to continue to grow well in the future. The next thing you have to consider is underground utilities. So in this figure here, you can see that the roots take up a lot of area and it makes up a good proportion of the tree underground. So you want to make sure that your tree isn't going to be interfering with any of these underground utilities. And also when you're digging the hole to plant your tree, you want to make sure that you're not hitting anything like this. So look into, make sure that there's nothing under there that's going to potentially be damaged during the planting of your tree. So the next thing is timing. There's a little bit of difference between deciduous and coniferous trees, and both types of trees can be planted in the spring or fall, but we'll just go over each of them a little bit separately here before we move on. So for deciduous trees, if you're planting in the spring, you want to do it immediately after the frost is out of the ground. This gives it enough time to establish and a lot of growing time throughout the season, and gives them a lot of time to develop before the next winter. However, in this case, as most of you are getting your trees in the fall now, it's also good to plant your trees in the fall. You want to wait until the leaves have fallen and before the ground, just up until the ground freezes. Those are the times that you can plant your tree in the fall. For coniferous trees, you have a little bit more of a window. You have until early spring, up until 4 weeks after the deciduous trees get their leaves. So that's a large window for coniferous trees to be planted in the spring. And then you also have a fairly large window in the fall, ranging from early August till early November would be ideal to get your coniferous trees planted. So a little bit on planting, how to set up before you actually get your tree, and then a little bit on transportation as well. So you want to make sure that your tree gets to your house in good shape. So you want to pad the trunks and the branches of the tree during transport to avoid damage. You want to make sure it's healthy. You're putting a healthy tree in the ground. You don't want to have damaged tree in the ground. So this is really important to consider. The second thing is you want to make sure you plant as early as possible. If you aren't able to plant it immediately, you want to make sure you store your tree in a cool shaded area, and you're going to have to water the tree daily or every other day depending on the conditions. But these pots are quite small and they don't hold a lot of water, and the tree requires a lot of water to grow and sustain life. So you're going to have to water it quite regularly if you don't get the tree in the ground as soon as possible. So to prepare the site before you even get the tree, you want to dig a hole as deep as the pot and 2 to 3 times as wide as the pot. So this loosens up the soil around the area, and it encourages the roots to grow into this loosened up soil. But when you dig the hole, you don't want to just have sharp, hard edges around the end too. You want to loosen that up to encourage farther root growth into the future once they get into that area. So for actually planting the tree, you want to gently pull the tree out of the pot. It's not as gentle as you might imagine, but you can hold up the tree by the trunk and tap the pot around the edges, and it should fall off easily. And if not, you could take a knife and cut along the pot, and then that will loosen up and should be able to pull out no problem. Next, you place the tree in the hole and you make sure the root ball is flush with the ground. You don't want to have the tree below the root line, because then when you pile the soil on top, it'll be on the trunk and the trunk will rot, and diseases and other infections might get in there as well. And then on this stage, you also want to make sure you're planting your tree straight, because you don't want to have your tree growing crooked in the ground. The next step would be to fill the hole in. So that's, as it sounds, you would use the same soil that you dug out of the hole to replace, but make sure you're not replacing any of the grass or sod on top. So once you got the soil into the ground, you want to pack it down, and that should make it around 2/3 of the way full. And then you could fill it with water the rest of the way, and that really allows the soil to pack in further. And then you wait for the soil to drain, and then you fill the hole the rest of the way, and that should have the soil nice and compact and allow the tree to grow properly moving forward. So a couple notes on actually maintaining the tree after it's planted, and we'll start with watering, because you want to make sure you water your tree immediately after you plant it. This really, again, helps set that soil into the ground and encourages the roots to grow. So watering a tree is a little different than what you would expect for your garden or your lawn. They need a lot of water, about 10 gallons, and this is going to take about 5 minutes for a medium pressure garden hose to produce. So you want to water it about once a week, and with this 10 gallons of water, and that should be more than enough water for your tree to grow properly. Since we're planting in the fall, you want to make sure that you water late into the fall up until the ground freezes. This, again, gives your tree enough nutrients and time to fully establish as much as possible before that frost and winter comes. And the other thing to consider is not to just water the roots. So since we're trying to encourage the roots to establish and grow farther into the ground, you want to water that surrounding area so that that is encouraging the roots to go there. If you leave it dry, they're not going to, there's nothing there for them to go get. And by watering it, it creates the right conditions for them to establish farther. Mulch is another good way to help with a lot of things. It helps insulates the roots, manage the water, as we talked about in the last slide. It reduces competition from grass and weeds, and it also protects the roots and trunks from physical damage, such as lawn mowers or whippersnippers. And yeah, there's a lot of other benefits as well that we don't have time to get into today, but make sure you put mulch on your tree. Now is a good time to do it too. You already have that hole dug, the grass is already removed, so the conditions are already set perfectly for you to apply the mulch and not have to do that extra work of removing that top layer of grass. So to actually apply the mulch, you want to add 2 to 4 inches of mulch over the entire area of that hole that we dug. So remember, it's not just over the roots, it's that 2 to 3 times the size of what we already, of the hole that we dug. The other thing is to make sure you don't create something that's called a mulch volcano. So if you look at the figure here on the right, the mulch is excessively piled up onto the trunk of the tree. And this has the same effect as putting the tree too deep into the hole. The mulch holds extra water against the trunk, and this could cause rotting or increase the chances of infection by some bacteria or insect. There's a couple of extra things that could need to be done, but don't need to be done in every single case. So the first thing we'll talk about are fertilizers. We'll want to avoid using fertilizers for the first year or two after the tree is planted. A lot of the time the tree just doesn't need it. It needs to focus on establishing roots, and by adding fertilizers, it's kind of promoting other types of growth that isn't quite required just yet. But if you do need to apply fertilizers, consider something like bone meal or something with high phosphorus. These are the types of fertilizers that would encourage root growth, and that is exactly what we're trying to do in these early stages of planting. The next thing is staking. This really isn't necessary for any trees unless you're in high wind areas or you have shallow soil and the tree is toppling over on its own without with just by being there. So when you're staking the tree, you want to make sure you use something soft. What's recommended is either like a tube from a bike tire or a stocking. These are both very flexible and they allow the tree to move a little bit, but and they're soft enough so that it doesn't damage the bark of the tree. You'll want to remove the stake after a year to avoid girdling, which is the thing that's tied around the tree from strangling the tree. It will eventually that will happen. And you also want to allow the tree to build its own strength by growing on its own without the support. The final thing to consider is pruning. So trees can be pruned to improve branch structure and remove dead or damaged branches, but this should wait until the tree is dormant, so late fall or early spring before the leaves come out. And these are the best times to encourage growth and to remove any of these unwanted branching. So that's what we have today. We talked a little bit about planting, the location, the timing, when to plant your tree, and then we also got into how to plant your tree specifically. And then we looked into a little bit of maintenance afterwards, such as watering, mulching, and then some extra care for situational trees that would include fertilizing, staking, and pruning. Hopefully this was useful for everybody, and hopefully your trees grow to be nice and beautiful and strong, and looking forward to see the great canopy cover improvements all over Long Branch. Thanks so much for listening, and have a good day.